Welcome to the S.J. Child Show, where a little bit of knowledge can turn fear into understanding. Enjoy the show. Hi, and welcome to the S.J. Child Show. Today, I am visiting with my new friend across the world, who you all know I'm so excited about talking to people around the globe, learning more about diversity, the culture, and really just how we are all one human race running in the same place, trying to get by. We're all so much similar than we are different, but our differences is of course what brings us here, because we are discussing just different kinds of personalities and brains and biological everything. So it's so good to have you here today, Christian. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me on, Sarah. It's a pleasure to be on with you.
And I'm sure some of you noticed a gorgeous accent, so tell us where you're from and a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, I'm actually from Eastern Europe, from Bulgaria, but I've lived in South Africa and Ireland for some 20 something years of my life. And I'm now in Portugal. I've been here for the last 5 years. So I've been around. So this accent started as kind of South African with an Eastern European twang, and then went to Ireland. It was like a Dublinese, how are you? So now I'm here in the south of Portugal, and I have no idea what I sound like anymore. But I'm glad at least somebody out there thinks it's gorgeous.
Absolutely. Oh, so nice to have
Oh,
you.
and yeah, I guess if you want to know a little bit more about me, I'm a health consultant. I've written one book on autism and children's health. I published that in 2020 in March, and that was basically that started with a child in my family was suspected of being on the spectrum in 2018. So I just had a very deep interest in health at the time, and there was a book I was reading called Nutrient Power by Dr. William Walsh, and he had a chapter on autism and kind of his research in autism. So I started following the references to the studies in that chapter of the book, and over the next, I guess, year and a half, it just grew into what culminated into this book the reason I published it, because I felt like that a lot of children with autism, or rather a lot of autistic individuals in general, they have a lot of underlying health problems that are that largely go unnoticed and unrecognized by the general practitioners that they go to. So a lot of children, the parents would take them to the doctor, and the child will have like a gut dysfunction or can't sleep or something like that, and the doctor will say it's because of the autism. Just very dismissive sort of attitude that I thought was pretty appalling, and I thought that a lot of these parents were not getting any support. So I just thought I'd publish this book based on the research that I did in the kind of in largely in 2019. And yeah, that's kind of how it started my journey, um, helping families with autistic kids along the way. Since then, I've done a lot of pro bono work. I've got some video courses that I share with parents that buy my book, and people that want to subscribe to my mailing list. I offer some free video courses. I love to work with families pro bono whenever my time schedule allows. And yeah, it's been a difficult but rewarding journey so far, I would say.
I couldn't agree with you more in that it is a difficult journey. And, um, you know, I have a unique perspective to be able to look at it from a mother's point of view first, and in regards to my son's health. Not only that, but I also had a background of a medical paralegal and a massage therapist. So going
Nice.
through those and understanding the body's how it works and functions and all of the systems, you know, even before I had an understanding that I was also autistic, I had an idea that it was a, you know, also neurological, but biological in our bodies change from what they would call typical. And that's just really the truth about it, is that I could see all of the things that were, you know, foods that would be okay for, say, one of our family members wouldn't be okay for my son. It was,
Hmm.
he was affected
Yeah.
differently in so many ways, with types of vitamins affected him differently, types of, and so that really started giving me the idea that, okay, um this is really happening on such a large scale cellular level rather than in only the brain pathways, like you had mentioned, in the gut and with the, there, I can't tell you how many times, you know, people with the same type of thing that you just said, the gut issues, which then can lead to all sorts of problems,
Yeah.
and unfortunately which behaviors also come out of, because
Yeah.
that child doesn't understand how to have these pains or whatever in their body and how to deal with them. And then also in understanding the how things affect our bodies, and, you know, pressure, gravity, all kinds of different ways. And I think it's interesting when you start to look at just kind of the human body rather than, you know, the autism, like you said, as a doctor. Just, oh, he's not sleeping because he's autistic. He's not doing
Yeah.
this because he's autistic. There's something biological happening. So let's
Yeah.
dig deeper and find out.
Yeah. One thing I learned very early on, I was attending workshops and watching a lot of videos from a lab that they specialize in some pretty advanced lab testing. And one of the doctors that was doing a lot of he's worked with thousands of autistic kids in the last 25 years almost, I think. And he would give us like little hints and tips. For example, he said with a younger child, when they're still largely non-verbal, if they're on the floor or they're trying to apply some type of pressure to their abdomen, um, that's indicative there's some type of gut discomfort, right? And I remember we were, excuse me, we were with my wife and my daughter at the doctor sometime last year, I think, and we were next in line, and a mother and her son came out, and the little dude, there was a couple of chairs outside of the doctor's office, and the little dude just kind of immediately applied his sort of abdomen to
Yeah.
so he was kind of horizontal in the chair. And I immediately kind of tapped my wife and like, look, that's a classic sign something is wrong with the gut. And usually the children, when they're that small, they can't verbalize it, but you would, someone like a clinician, can very callously just say, oh, just one of those behaviors that, autistic people have. It's unbelievable. So this doctor, he also said that there's a certain compound we can measure in the urine called oxalate, which you
Mhm.
may know
Yeah.
about,
Yeah.
which is very commonly elevated in the autistic kids when we test them with this lab test. And he said that when it's extremely elevated and kids have eye poking behaviors, when they literally poke their eyes out, not out, but when they literally poke their eyes, um, they have very often very high oxalates, which, because they create these little crystals, these oxalates, they can cause a lot of pain and discomfort. And sometimes when we have self-injurious behavior, sometimes the self-injury, be it an eye poking, head banging, that creates enough of a distraction from the other thing, the other irritation, be
Yeah.
that, some type of irritation in the back of the eyeball or some other thing. So that kind of, when you see something like aggression or self-injurious behavior in any child, whether they have any diagnosis or not, it's usually indicative something is going on that requires further investigation. I remember there was one study that I cited in my book, and these guys were doing really good work. Forget where they were, maybe in somewhere in the eastern US, but they they really were kind of ringing the bell that a lot of autistic kids that were going to their office, they were very often had some type of allergic condition, and as well as the autism. And they were saying, yeah, or rather saying it kind of as part of the published paper, that doctors or clinicians should not dismiss a number of behaviors presented because of the autism. They should check, is the child, does the child have asthma or some other thing? Because sometimes when you have, excuse me, when you have some type of allergic condition, it can cause a lot of problems like sleep problems, mouth breathing, any number of things like crankiness, aggression, behavioral manifestations. So we cannot be so callous as to say it's because of the autism. I think that is like really the medicine of 300 years ago, when we were using leeches and bloodletting,
Yeah.
for God's sake, right? Or arsenic as a cure-all. Like the
Yeah.
clinician of today must be extremely, at least in my view, empathetic to the family, listen to the family. If they're like a clinician that works in an office, observe the child, like look, inspect, like could there be some, palpate their body, could there be a lump, because some of these kids with really severe constipation, I remember that we were shown a picture in one of those workshops of a stool that was passed after a very long time, that was as long as my forearm, like we're
Mhm.
talking 15 inches. And these things happen. Gut dysfunction is rampant in all kids nowadays. I have lots of clients with neurotypical kids. I don't know how you like to
Yeah.
call them, but with just extreme constipation. Just we're doing lab testing, we're seeing a lot of very pathogenic overgrowth. So the I think medicine is still stuck in like some 50, 60, 80 years ago. Now we have the diagnostic tools. We have a lot of tools at our disposal to really non-invasively understand what is really at the root of a lot of the health problems that the kids nowadays are having.
Yeah, no, I think that's, you couldn't have said any of that better. Like, I completely agree with you. And, in our own instance, I love just referencing so, people can hear it kind of in real life story of how it goes. Like, our son had, has always had self-injurious behavior, unfortunately. And also we have, very early on understood that gluten and dairy were not within his body's boundaries of intake, which
Hmm.
made a huge difference for him and for us. Not only did he start speaking after being, non-speaking for 4 years, he
Wow.
also in had already been reading and writing at that point. He started reading at 1 and writing at 2. And so when he was 4, he had already had this huge vocabulary he had processed in. And so then he was
Amazing.
able to say all these things. But the gluten was so, it affected his gut and his proprioception so much that, just like you said, he would oftentimes just spin in circles for hours, lunge onto things. And we would have to like cushion rooms so that he wouldn't just
Wow.
spin into the walls and spin in, and always upside down or always these things. But after this was all taken out, it was maybe like 4 years ago that he got a kidney stone. So it's so interesting that you brought up the oxalates, because
Mm,
he got a kidney stone,
interesting.
and he didn't have, he has a super high pain tolerance. So we didn't see any pain, any, I can't even recognize if he had any behaviors ahead of that. We didn't see it until it was lodged and ready to come out.
Oh my God.
So he had passed this whole entire thing, and it was pretty big.
Oh my
And
God.
then, of course, now after that, after researching that it was made up of the oxalates, I'm just so
Yeah.
happy that you brought that up, because that brought a lot. I'm going to make my urologist listen to this episode, in fact, because it really is interesting. And I, said to him, well, what can I do? Because, he has these like limited foods that he'll eat, and he doesn't try new things very often. And it's citric acid that I need
Yeah.
to get in his body to balance those oxalates. And so it's really tricky trying to figure out things. And one of the nurse practitioners came in during one of our appointments and said, Skittles have citric acid in them. And if he will eat a Skittle, that might be a way you could possibly be able to get some. So that's the only thing we've been able to. And,
I've got
only
I've
not
got a
a
tip
lot of
there.
them, of course, but yeah.
Yeah. Because citric acid is kind of industrially processed. You probably want to not use that much. But what yeah, and I've written in my book about this. When we suspect oxalates are high or we can see them on a lab test, the best thing to do obviously is to start reducing slowly the oxalate content of the diet, about 5-10% per week.
We think it was
And
peanut butter. Yeah.
yeah, peanut butter has a lot of oxalate. So, but what is good to start doing is with meals to take calcium and or magnesium citrate. So
Mm.
you were on the money there, but when you do it with calcium and magnesium, if there's no, let's say, oxalate to get bound up, then you're adding calcium and magnesium, which is great to do because especially when you take dairy out of the diet, kids
Mm.
really need a lot of calcium, as we know.
Yeah.
Something like 1,200 milligrams is kind of probably the bare minimum. And it's hard to get that in other foods. They say spinach has a lot of um, calcium, but the bioavailability is something like 5%. And spinach is the highest oxalate containing food by a huge margin.
Oh, dang.
So it's and I believe a lot of the calcium is actually in the form of calcium oxalate, which is a very tightly bound complex that you're not it's just gonna either pass through you or God forbid you might absorb it. So if you have leaky gut or something like that. So
Yeah.
calcium and magnesium citrate are good options too. But here's another thing, and this is more for the kidney stone side of things because some folks in my family have suffered from kidney stone. So I did a little bit of research, and it turns out there's a herb called chanca
Okay.
piedra, chanca piedra, which means stone breaker.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
um yeah, I forget the botanical name, but if you go to Amazon, you can get it as a tea very easily, and they even sell it as a 10-to-1 extract, at least in my area of the world. But the tea is quite common. I think it's a very important ethnobotanical I've print out of 30 pages with research of the benefits and all the different things it's good for, but it's a classic, or rather an ancestral remedy for stones, for kidney stones, that is. So I would look into that and maybe start having a couple of teas of Chanca
Wow.
Piedra daily to
Oh, I
start
appreciate
dissolving the
that.
stones if there's
Yeah,
any.
definitely. Well, and it's just so interesting how when we look at these things, like we are also my family have outer ear microtia. We have these really tiny little ears,
Oh, interesting.
which I didn't know until the one of our further appointments when the nurse had said to me, "So, have you had kidney problems?" And I said, "No, why?" And she said, "Well, because the kidneys and the ears form at the same time gestationally. So that I don't know." And I was
Interesting.
like, "Oh, that's kind of
Wow.
interesting too." So
Hmm.
it's
Never knew
crazy.
that.
Yeah,
That's
our
amazing.
bodies are just so fascinating,
Yeah.
and like you said, it cannot be just answered by it's autism, it's autistic, it's
Yeah.
because of this. Like everybody has to go deeper, and and that's with respect to everyone that can go deeper. I'm not telling the child who's nonverbal to figure it out. I'm telling the people who work with that child to look closer and do all of the research, not just
Yeah.
a little bit, or just really deep dive. And I think that our experience of autism is changing in the world. And now, with this new era of perspective, we'll really be able to help so many families, especially with the numbers increasing as they would seem. I think it's always been. Now we just have we're looking at it. Like now we're
Yeah.
just like directly looking at it, but it's not like it never was. Because I've been on this earth for 47 years and nobody knew till I was 45, right? So it just goes to show that it's how deep we look and is what we find is. And so I think that people like you who's out there doing research and really not just saying it's a behavior, like, oh, give it some therapy, those kinds of things. Yeah, therapies are fantastic and work amazing when they're put into action for specific goals and measurable. But nutrition in our bodies and our biological systems, that can't be overlooked.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. I mean, just thinking about the fact that we have the gut, and the immune system and the gut are super tightly linked to something. We have something like 60-70% of the immune cells, all of the immune cells of the body are co-located around the gut. And also the fact that the gut is kind of like a part of the nervous system. And there's a communication network, or there's this concept of the gut brain axis, right? And then you have the gut microbiota brain axis. So the microbes, the milieu of microbes in our gut, the immune cells, the nerves that connect the brain, so that there's a kind of a two-way communication system there. So stuff happening in the gut is most certainly going to be affecting our behavior. Not, again, doesn't matter if you are autistic, if you have no diagnosis, if you have ADHD, or if you have Alzheimer's disease. It doesn't matter. When if you take any person, and there's a bunch of what are known as gram negative bacteria in the gut, and they start to proliferate for whatever reason. Maybe that person is eating too much fiber, maybe that person had some type of insult to the gut, or stress that caused a lot of the pathogenic overgrowth. They're going to, the higher turnover of these bacteria, they're going to proliferate. um, they, as they die, parts of their cell walls called endotoxins are going to, they can inflame the gut, they can open up the gut, they can get into the bloodstream, cause very strong immune reactions, they can damage the blood-brain barrier, they can even get into the central nervous system and cause neuroinflammation, these endotoxins. It's a very researched area. Just today I was looking, there was something like 132,000 published papers on with the keyword endotoxin on PubMed. I was just doing some research for my next book. So it's a universal thing. We all have probably some amount of bacteria that are gram negative that produce this endotoxin. So under the right conditions, under the right quote unquote bad conditions, stress, toxins, whatever else, we could all get this perturbation in the gut um, ecosystem, and that will affect how we sleep. So they've done studies when they inject volunteers, which I don't know who would volunteer for this, but they inject them with this endotoxin with nanogram amounts per kilogram. They can reliably produce symptoms of depression,
Mm.
cognitive dysfunction, like on psychomotor tests and stuff like that. So this endotoxin is a very, very serious thing that all of us, to some extent, are dealing with on a daily basis. It just seems like some people are more compromised in terms of their gut function or their immune system, or any number of things. Let's say that the diet could be an issue or a factor, more toxicity than normal. So, or like sleep problems, stress at home, trauma as a child. So we all have this. It's just a matter of how well do we deal with it, and when it becomes problematic, how do the people around us, including the clinicians that we go to, how do they help us investigate and address the underlying factors causing us this distress?
Mm. Oh, that's so amazing. And there's no end to learning about the body too. And we have to just continue to keep to keep learning. What are some things you might recommend to a family to start to learn how to find out about the toxicity of your body or your child's body?
In terms of information, if I do say so myself, I believe my book is a very good resource. Now, I published the book in 2020, and since then, I've definitely changed my stance on a few things, but I believe the majority of the information is still, I still stand by it. So actually, one thing I have changed my view on is sugar. I actually don't think sugar is the devil anymore. Um, but yeah, to answer your question, yeah, so really a good place, other than my book, a good place to go is the ewg.org. So the Environmental Working Group, they have a website, and what I'd recommend is just perusing the website. They have two lists. One is called the Clean 15, and one is called the Dirty Dozen. Now, the Dirty Dozen, they update these lists every year. The Dirty Dozen is the 12 fruits or vegetables that are shown to be most sprayed with pesticides. So what you're gonna see when you go to the Dirty Dozen list is a lot of the very commonly consumed fruits like apple, anything with a thin skin, or a berry or a summer fruit like peaches, nectarines, apples, pears, strawberries. A lot of these things with a thin skin that's a summer fruit are very, because they're so sort of fragile and juicy and the bugs can really dig into them very easily. um they're really highly sprayed with all sorts of fungicides, pesticides and stuff. So I would, those clean 15 or dirty dozen rather, I would avoid those. I wouldn't buy them. If you can afford to get them organic, yeah, that's I would recommend get them organic. If you feel like the organic version is too expensive, which sometimes it can be, or it might not be in season, that's one of the problems with organic, is you have to kind of eat more in season. But just skip them. To be honest, fruit, for me, fruit is more of getting some carbohydrate in you and a few vitamins. It's and some vitamin C. It's not really, that's not where the bulk of the nutrition is coming from the diet, right? I believe the bulk of the nutrition, especially for a growing child, should be coming from animal products. Now I know some folks are plant-based out there, and that we have to make sort of changes in that scenario. But if you're not plant-based, I believe, um, for kids that can't eat dairy, butter is still good. Organic pasture, just the highest quality meat you can afford.
Yeah.
And egg yolks are another great source of everything. Liver, I think if you can put liver on your child's plate, a tiny amount, even like 2 ounces, 2-3 times a week, you're just, it's nature's multivitamin. That's what I call it. It's got
Wow.
all the minerals, all the vitamins, all the things we haven't even discovered that are actually essential for life, which God knows there could be hundreds of them. So um the to finish the EWG thing, they also have the clean 15. Now those are things like tubers, root vegetables like sweet potato, things with a thick skin or some type of rind, so watermelon, avocado, sweet potato, onion. These are okay to not buy organic, so you can save a bit of money there, and then save your money for kind of the higher quality food like organic pastured eggs, grass-fed meat ideally. um, and then they also have a lot of good stuff, like they have this cat, I forgot the name of the, you it's very hard to miss, but it's a thing where you can put in your, let's say, cornflakes, or let's say
Mm.
whatever food you
Yeah.
have at home, you can put in, and they give you like a rating from
Mm.
1 to 10 how good or bad it is. And then generally the lower the rating, the less crap it has, the less chemicals and questionable ingredients it has. So it has that for a lot of
That's neat.
manufactured foods, and it also has that for personal care products. So
Mm.
sometimes when my wife is pretty good about these things. We've been doing this now for years and years. But before I would go into this and like L'Oreal something or other, look up her L'Oreal cream, and like, honey, it's an 8. Like we wanna be at least at most a 4 here on these chemically things. So it's a good thing to quickly see what you all the products you're using, your shampoos, whatever else. See what's kind of the worst offender in terms of
Yeah.
either outright harmful chemicals shown to be harmful or very questionable things, which generally from the grocery store, most of those things, anything with a name brand that's been advertised on TV, generally I would highly advise to avoid. Um, and then check yours on on their app. I think it's
I
called
love that.
uh Clean Living or something like that. There's an app you can download. So that's a really good place to start. The other thing, and I talk about this in on my podcast, on my book, and everywhere else that I can, but you really have to get a shower filter. This is something that you can get done in 5 minutes. You go online on Amazon, type in shower filter, $50 or whatever it is. Getting a shower filter, the whole family is going to benefit. You shower once, sometimes twice a day in the summer to be able to avoid the chlorine hitting your skin and absorbing through, or hitting the bathroom floor and then evaporating and you breathing it in every day for
Wow.
the next 50, 60 years, 70 years, to be able to avoid that is a really good thing. um, like I always say, it's not every one of these toxic things that we're exposed to on a daily basis individually is tiny, but over the course of a day we're talking about
Yeah.
dozens of things
Huge
and they
buildup.
accumulate. Yeah, so those are some of the very easy low hanging fruit things I would recommend to begin with.
I love that. That is so tangible, easy to do. I'm seriously hanging up and looking up shower filter as soon as we're done. I mean, we
Nice.
already over the last probably 7 to 8 years
Mm.
have been only buying water at a water distillery where
Nice.
we buy 25 gallons at a time for $12 or something.
That's wow,
It's
that's pretty good.
so wonderful. And that's the only beverage our son drinks, in fact. And that was kind of funny that we were talking about this. I love that we had this conversation because one of the things the urologist had said to me was every single time, he's not drinking enough water. He's not drinking enough water. And I'm like, listen, man,
Mm.
the only thing this kid drinks is water, and he is constantly drinking water. I can't make him drink any more water. You want me to flog the kid? Like there's literally no way he can
Yeah.
consume any more water than he's already drinking. I love that you brought this all up because it helps me kind of to not feel like I'm crazy or like the doctor's questioning me, and I'm like, dude, like I know exactly what I'm talking about here.
Yeah.
But I think it just like we're here on the podcast, and I want to talk about your podcast too. Just like we're able to educate, these doctors still need to get some more education when it comes
Yeah.
to all of the new information that's coming out. And really, it is, I mean, on them to do so. However, I love that we can bring this information as easily as possible to them. Well, yeah, let's talk about your podcast. What is it called? And where can listeners go to check it out?
Mm. Yeah, it's everywhere. It's called Children's Health Podcast. To
Oh,
be honest,
fantastic.
yeah, I don't even know what I'm doing with this podcast at the moment. It's kind of a few months ago I changed. So it used to be Autism and Children's Health. It was about my book, but then I figured all of this information I'm sharing, pretty much, unless it's very specific to some autism research, it's all families
Yeah.
should be able to benefit from this information. So it kind of changed the name, and then I started interviewing more folks, right? And we're talking about more relationships with the partner and kind of a little bit more kind of wider range. But then I noticed I definitely lost some listeners now. It was probably because it was summertime, but I'm sure a lot of the folks that were tuning in just for my research on autism, they were probably like, okay, this guy's not going to be giving me much more research. But I have a huge backlog of episodes that will be solely just kind of nutrition studies, stuff like that, that's coming
Yeah.
out. It's just a shame some folks left. But yeah, so that's kind of the podcast. Want it to be I want to talk about some of the topics that are a little bit more not taboo. Nothing
Yeah.
is really taboo nowadays, but just kind of the things, the uncomfortable topics that a lot of people try to like not
Yeah.
not discuss, or things that are frowned upon, or things that might get you censored on YouTube or get your YouTube channel closed. I don't really, I don't want to shy away from any of those topics. So we have a lot of folks that are kind of, homeschooling, or they don't, like, we have people that don't vaccinate their kids and they tell their story and why. And then I want to present those folks' points of view, that they're not like crazy, hippies or whatever else. So it's
Absolutely.
kind of like that. And then in the coming months, as I have more time, probably after I publish my next book, I want to do more just real deep dives into kind of some of the research. For example, um, I was looking at a paper that talks about how from a medical conventional medical perspective, how they treat constipation in kids, right? And just the whole thing was quite interesting to go through the algorithm, right? And I want to discuss that and
Yeah.
kind of give the more functional perspective. What could a parent do without having tubes stuck up their child's
Yeah.
butt,
Oh,
excuse my
yeah.
my language. Because it seems like a lot of these things that are functional in nature, they still want to look at them as structural problems. Like if your child is not pooping, I'm not sure if, I'm sure, yes, you want to rule out serious pathology always, right? But I'm not sure if your child's not pooping for a week or for a month. Well, I'm not sure that they suddenly had some type of colonic obstruction or something crazy happened, unless they swallowed like a toy or which, something crazy like that. It's usually some type of functional thing. It could be like a microbiota imbalance, something with the food, the fiber, too little, too much. So we need to teach parents what to do as a first line of defense before having themselves and their children subjected to a lot of unneeded stress and procedures. But I'm not saying that you shouldn't go see your doctor or anything like that. Always see your doctor if you suspect this, that, or the other. It could be serious, of course.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. I think that wow, we'll have a lot of interesting topics to be able to
Mm.
discuss later for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
And I can't wait to share you some more things about myself and some of the things that have happened along our journey with health, and interesting how it all comes back to once
Sarah,
again.
I apologize. I don't, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but something came to my head, to my mind earlier. Um, Talking about again, so this is again sort of the dismissive ad, and I actually don't want you to show this to your urologist, because I'm kind of going to bash a little bit on the system
Yeah,
here, but
certainly. I'll
this
just tell them I know more information.
but no, I think it's important to say this thing. It's again this really dismissive attitude. Imagine you go to the doctor, and the doctor, after 8 years of medical school, is that all you can offer? Are you making sure your child is freaking drinking enough water? Like seriously, like do they think we're like as parents, we're at home like oompa loompas, like walking around the
Yeah.
house banging our heads into the wall, and then we're oh, kid not feeling well, take to doctor. Like we're doing research, we're doing our best, like we're constantly, like it's our biggest worry, it's our most important job, and most of us understand that. So to go to the doctor, um usually it's something pretty serious, right? So I'm kind of surprised that the doctor in your case, because like it's not normal for a child, that first of all, it's not normal for a person to have a kidney stone,
At
but
9?
at
No.
9 it's extremely not normal
Yeah.
to be having kidney stones. So what I would think, if I would, with my rudimentary knowledge, is, would you maybe test for hyperoxaluria? There is a genetic thing, hyperoxaluria, and this lab test that I use, the organic acids test, tests for the hyperoxaluria, oxalates just in general. But here's the other thing, and I don't expect doctors to know this, but certain fungi in the gut, they can actually create oxalates as well. So it's believed that Candida can do it, certain Aspergillus species, and I forget one more other fungi can do that. So you got the dietary factor, we're talking oxalates from the diet. We have the potential for some type of genetic uh, oxaluria, where there's could be like a variation in the metabolism of oxalates. There could be the in some cases, high doses of vitamin C can actually raise oxalates, and it could also be the fungal candida yeast type thing. So there's a lot of avenues or threads that can be pulled. So I think it's like, would you be, I wouldn't be too impressed if I went and paid, like, let's say $80, or it's €80 here, to go to the doctor, and the doctor told me, you sure you drink enough water? Or like, I had a friend of mine fainted in the middle of summer after warming up for his sports game, and went to the doctor, and went to another doctor that's more natural based, and they all did, one did lab work, another did other, and in the end it's like, you're not drinking enough electrolytes. Like, you need to eat more salt. Literally, after all of this, all the lab work, they were like, you need to just drink more, take more salt, man. So it's not very impressive to go to like the cutting edge after 8 or 10 years of medical school and whatnot, and to be told, yeah, are you sure you even you're keeping your child adequately hydrated
Yeah,
after
right.
all of these, the slow hanging fruit that you can do and
Yeah.
look for and test for.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more with that. And that it is partially why I do so much heavy research on every single thing, my own health, my own, I oftentimes go to a doctor with my findings and say, this is
Yeah.
what I found. So give me the go ahead or tell me I'm okay to do it, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
I decreased my migraine suffering so incredibly by finding natural soy with estrogen. Just I do a little, like, 4 glasses of soy milk the week prior to hormones, and boy has it, like,
Does it
it's
help?
literally decreased my migraines so much so that I used to have to go to the emergency room monthly because of them.
Oh
And I
my
do
God.
have a prescription medicine, but now that I've been able to kind of understand that that's, I mean, bad topic for this, but the my hormones are, and so when I
Hmm.
realized that they kept telling me, oh, it's progesterone or this and that, and I was just like, it doesn't make sense. All of these things aren't working. They're not working. It's not what you're saying it is. So when I implemented my own studying, did my own research, started healing myself, like, I've had so much success. So, and I think that you have to
Amazing.
like
It's
advocate for
amazing.
yourself and be your
Hmm.
own doctor. Right? It's like
Well,
I've gone through 47 years of doctor school now.
well, you are, at the end of the day, absolutely. There is no such thing as a healer that heals other people. We are self-healers.
Yeah.
So you are your own doctor at the end of the day. You are then, and if you read the research on placebo, man, like, it's incredible. Like, oh God, I was reading something a few days ago where a guy, I think it was cancer, and this was quite well publicized because there was a novel drug. He was part of the trial, complete remission, went back to work and everything after being super debilitated and incapacitated. Um, then he saw on TV that they're withdrawing the drug, and he went into remission, or so he basically relapsed and died very quickly. But in between, then the researchers told him that this is um, a changed formulation of the drug, because he saw initially that it's ineffective on the news or whatever. Then they told him this is a changed formulation that's actually effective. So he had healed himself, then he relapsed. So then he healed himself again, and then finally he saw on the TV that they're completely withdrawing the drug, and that's when he died very quickly after relapsing. Forget the exact disease. I think it was cancer, but it just goes to show you the power of the mind and the power of the
Yeah.
placebo effect.
Yeah. Isn't that the truth? And
Yeah,
really, when it comes down to it, especially for those of us that have the amazing ability to have, cognitive thoughts and things like that, that we can overcome so much and really just be resilient in as
yeah,
human beings. And I think that we need to understand to also look at children with that same resilience and realize that, like you said, if there's one thing happening that your doctor can't explain, like you need to look deeper. You need to look elsewhere. Listen to this podcast, come up with some new ideas to think about, go check out Christian's podcast so that you can learn about all the research he's doing. And thank you so much for sharing this experience with me and your knowledge, and really just your apathy for the world and the community that you're working with, and goes to show your generosity of spirit.
Oh, thank you so much, Sarah. It was a great pleasure to talk to you, and I'm sure you'll be on my show, and we'll be having more conversations because it really flows. And like you rightly said, there's a lot I need to learn more about you, and we get to know each other better. But yeah, looking forward to a fruitful not relationship, but friendship.
Well, I agree. No,
So,
completely agree. Connections are the best connections. So,
yeah,
it's been wonderful. Thank you so much for your time.
thank
Before we
you.
go, oh my gosh, tell everyone where they can go to find the book. Do you have a website? All of the things.
Yeah, the book is on Amazon. You can also find it on my website. Everything is on my website. It's christianyordanov.com, and you can find all my links there, all my podcasts and courses and everything else.
Wonderful. Well, and I'll be definitely going on there to follow so that I can start listening. And I'm really just so glad we made this connection. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir.